Hey y'all, welcome back and thanks for stopping by. If you're new here, my name is Stephanie and today I've got 4 gorgeous candy cane themed DIYs perfect for this upcoming holiday season. Let's jump right in. DIY number 1, easy candy cane themed LED candles. For this project, I used a set of 3 LED real wax candles from Walmart and a package of tissue paper that had a candy cane theme also from Walmart. For these candles, I used the red, candy cane striped, and white tissue papers from this pack. First, I took the large LED candle and measured out how much of the candy cane striped tissue paper I needed to completely cover the outside of the candle and cut it out. It doesn't matter if the tissue is a little too tall because you can always trim it to size once you have the tissue on the candle. I would, however, suggest trying to get the tissue the exact size around the candle because once the tissue is melted into the candle, it is hard to trim off any excess without pulling the tissue back off the candle. Once I had the tissue paper cut to size, I wrapped it around the candle with the factory cut side even with the bottom of the candle. Then using my heat tool on high, I melted the wax on the candle just long enough for the tissue paper to start melting into the wax. You can see when the tissue starts to turn kind of translucent that it has enough melted wax on it to hold it in place. I never left the heating tool on one spot longer than a few seconds because the wax will melt fairly quickly. I then went around the entire candle melting the tissue into the wax. I do want to mention that for this project you'll want to make sure the LED candles you are using are made of real wax or this method will not work. I also would recommend not using a real candle if you intend to light it. If you don't have a heat tool, you can use a hairdryer on the highest heat setting and it'll work just as well as a heating tool. Once I had all 3 candles wrapped, I cut off the excess tissue paper at the top and bottom of the candles. I did find out later that if you use a piece of sandpaper and lightly sand the tissue, it leaves a cleaner, smoother edge. I repeated the same steps using the red tissue paper on the medium candle and the white tissue paper on the small candle. I used the white tissue paper on an already white candle because I wanted the set to all have the same finish, and the tissue paper does dull down the shine just a little bit. That's it for this first DIY. It was quick and easy to do. I really do love how these candles turned out, and I can't wait to display them with my holiday decor. Today's video is part of a very special collaboration with my good friend Amanda over at 6 Kids and a Glue Gun. Here's a sneak peek of what she has for y'all over on her video today, so be sure to go to the link in the description box below and check out her video. There will be tons of sweet treat inspiration for you over there. She is so sweet and talented, and she has so many fun videos over on her channel, including several already for this upcoming holiday season. Moving on to DIY number 2, a candy cane Christmas tree. For this project, I started with 2 of the white Christmas trees from Dollar Tree. First, I removed the white piece that goes to the stand from both trees and fluffed out the branches so that I could easily see which branches belonged to each of the 5 sections on the tree. Once I had the branches fluffed, I took some Reynolds Wrap foil sheets from Dollar Tree and masking tape and used them to cover every other row of branches, starting with the very top of the tree, then covering the 3rd row of branches, and then covering the very bottom row of branches so that they would remain white when I painted the other rows of branches that I did not cover red. When I was covering the branches, I made sure they were completely covered and used the masking tape around the trunk of the tree to make sure they stayed white right up against the trunk. If there happens to be any holes in the foil or if it isn't sealed tight, paint will end up on the branches that are supposed to stay white. Once I had all the branches that needed to stay white covered, I placed the stands back on both trees and separated the remaining branches that were going to be painted red so that they were easier to paint. Then I took both trees outside and gave the branches a couple of coats of Rust-Oleum spray paint in Colonial Red, making sure to cover all sides of the remaining branches. While the trees were drying, I took one of the wooden boxes from Dollar Tree and gave the entire box, inside and out, one good coat of folk art chalk paint in rich black. Once the trees were dry, I brought them back inside and moved all the branches to one side of the tree so that I could put the 2 trees together to make one fuller looking tree. I placed the 2 trees back to back with the branches facing outwards and used some zip ties between each section of branches to attach them together. After the trees were attached to one another, I replaced one of the stands on one side of the tree and fluffed all the branches so the tree would look nice and full. To give the tree a nice stand, I used the wooden box I painted black, some floral foam, and some of the leftover red tissue paper from the first DIY. I cut out a square of tissue paper the size of the wooden box and set it on top of the box along with a piece of floral foam that was also cut to the size of the box. And then I pushed the foam down into the box. I used the tissue paper around the floral foam so that you couldn't see the green foam through the holes in the side of the box. Next, I cut another piece of tissue paper to act as the tree skirt and placed it down on top of the floral foam. Then I removed the stand from the tree and pushed it down into the floral foam as close to the center of the box as possible. Once I had the tree in place, I trimmed off the tissue paper around the edges of the box so that it would be flush with the top of the box. Once I had the tissue paper trimmed up around the top of the box, I used small dabs of hot glue in all four corners to hold the tissue paper down on the floral foam. Then, to finish off this project, I took silver tacks and stuck one in each of the corners of the slats on the front and back of the box that is now the tree stand. I used 6. If you don't want to actually push the tacks into the wood because it can be difficult sometimes depending on how thick the box is because they do tend to vary from Dollar Tree, you could always cut off the sharp end of the tack and use hot glue to attach the head of the tack onto the wood. That's it for this one, y'all. I'm so happy with how it turned out. I thought about decorating it, but I honestly think I love it just like it is. I do plan on putting some tiny presents under it, though. Let's get started with DIY number 3, which is my favorite, a candy cane felt leaf wreath. For this project, I used a large leaf template roughly 5 inches long and 2 inches wide, and a small leaf template roughly 3.5 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. I just Googled leaf template and printed them out on cardstock the size I wanted them. I also used 3 sheets of white premium felt and 4 sheets of red premium felt. Premium felt is just a thicker sheet of felt and it'll hold up the leaves a little bit better. And 2 sheets of foil candy cane scrapbook paper, all from Hobby Lobby. I started by tracing the leaves onto the felt and scrapbook paper with a black fine tip marker. I traced 27 large red leaves, 20 large white leaves, 10 large candy cane leaves, 9 small red leaves, 4 small white leaves, and 3 small candy cane leaves. I'll leave all the measurements and quantities in the description box below so they're easier to find if you want to make one of these wreaths. Once I had all the leaves traced out, I cut them all out. I made sure to cut on the inside of the black line so that they would not leave any black on the leaves once they were on the wreath. After I had all the leaves cut out, it was time to put them all together. I used floral wire for those stems so they would easily attach to the wreath form. I cut 60 pieces of the wire, each at 3 inches long. To assemble the candy cane leaves, I took one of the red felt leaves and put one of the candy cane scrapbook leaves on top of it. I then put a line of hot glue on the red leaf where the stem was going to be sandwiched between the 2 pieces. I then put the piece of wire in for the stem. With the stem in place, I used hot glue to glue the scrapbook leaf onto the felt leaf. Then I took some detailing scissors and trimmed off the scrapbook paper that was hanging over the felt. There was a couple of times on some of the leaves where the felt was hanging over the scrapbook paper, and I went ahead and cleaned that up as well. To shape the leaf, I pinched the ends together down at the stem until I was happy with the shape of the leaf. Once I was happy with the shape of the leaf, I used a dab of hot glue and held it into place until the glue set up. It was sometimes a little difficult to get the scrapbook paper to bend the right way, but with a little bit of patience, it was no problem. I repeated these steps until I had all 13 candy cane leaves made. I put the red and white single leaves together exactly the same way as I did the candy cane leaves, except the stem, which wasn't sandwiched between 2 leaves. I just put a line of glue where the stem goes and pinched the felt up over the wire. The white and red single leaves were much quicker and easier to shape than the candy cane leaves. Then I repeated all these steps until I had all the leaves put together. This next step is completely optional, but I decided I didn't like how the stem area looked on the leaves, especially the candy cane leaves. It just looked messy. I'm pretty picky about my projects looking finished, so I decided to take some white yarn that I had on hand and wrap it around the wire stem and up to where the leaf begins to take shape, using hot glue on each end. For the base of this wreath, I used the largest ring from the 3-piece brass wreath ring set from Dollar Tree. If you can't find this set of rings, you could still create this wreath by using the 14-inch wreath form that Dollar Tree carries and cutting off the outside ring. I wanted to make sure the wreath had a cohesive look, so I used the white yarn and hot glue to wrap the wreath ring. Once I had all the pieces made and the ring wrapped, it was time to start putting the wreath together. I started with no set pattern in mind and played around with the leaves until I was happy with the pattern that started to take shape. I did not use any hot glue to attach any of the leaves. I just twisted the stems tightly around the ring once I had the leaf where I wanted it to stay. I did try to fluff the wreath while I was working on it so that I could see how it was turning out and make adjustments where they were needed. I did not want to glue any of the leaves down to the wreath form because I was unsure of how I wanted them to lay or if I was going to have to move any of them so that the wreath would look more balanced. Twisting the wire around the form worked out great and I've had no issues with the leaves moving, but if you wanted to, you could use some hot glue to make sure they stay put. I will say that this project was quite a bit of work, but I found it very relaxing to work on, and the outcome is really gorgeous and so worth all the time put into making the wreath. Once I had all the leaves in place, I fluffed them up a little bit and that was it. Like I said, this was a bit time consuming, but I am absolutely in love with how it turned out. This wreath has to be my favorite project of the day. Last but certainly not least, DIY number 4, an old-fashioned candy cane shop sign. For the base of the sign, I used one of the 10 by 10 inch plywood circles from a 3-pack I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I started by giving the front of the circle a couple of coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color white. Next, I gave the outside edges of the circle a coat of Waverly chalk paint in the color crimson. Next, I took a template for the sign that I traced off a simple Google search and taped it onto a piece of carbon paper. This is by far my favorite method of transferring images to paint. Once I had the template taped to the carbon paper, I centered it on the wood circle and taped it down so that it would not move while I transferred the image onto the sign. To transfer the image, I used a sharp tip pen, but anything that has a good pointed end that's not too sharp will work. I used the pen to trace the image, which allowed the carbon paper to copy the image onto the wood circle. And this is what it looks like once the image is transferred and the paper is removed. I'm telling y'all, this is my favorite way to do transfers. I love that it gives it that hand-drawn look. I used folk art chalk paint in the color rich black and some fine tip paint brushes to paint all the words on the sign. Once the paint on the words was dry, I used Waverly chalk paint in the color crimson and fine tip paint brushes to paint the remaining details on the sign. That's it for this one, y'all. It was easy to make and I think it looks great. I'm very happy with how it turned out. It's a simple design but is going to look amazing with my holiday decor theme this year. Here's one final look at today's projects. I'm thrilled with how they turned out and it really does put me in the holiday spirit. Which one of today's projects is your favorite? Don't forget to go check out Amanda's video for more sweet treat inspiration. Her link is in the description box below. Thank you so much for spending a part of your day with me today, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help out my channel. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Click that button and stick around. I have a bunch of fun projects on the way. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more candy cane themed DIYs. I have lots of ideas. I'll see y'all next time.